Our last talk on our Future of Services session is being given now by Ryan Adams of Instill. Ryan is a trainer in Instill, and his talk is now on cloudformation for developers. So Ryan is queued up next, I believe.
Hopefully you're all enjoying the conference so far. So this is a short 10-minute talk about cloudformation from a developer's perspective, and really the overall question is this fear in my mind that YAML developer is going to be one of my future jobs, that I'm going to lose my skills as a software developer and end up writing YAML files all day. And I just want to run through some ideas and see whether that's a possibility. So the answer, of course, TLDR, no. We're still going to be writing software, we're still going to be using our programming languages, and YAML is not going to be that language. It's not going to be the one big thing that defines our future. But it is going to be significant, I think, or at least the kind of the technique and the tools that we're using that we're writing YAML for are going to be tools that we use a lot in the future. But let's go back into the long distant past. Let's go back to 1978, I think, and this article, Programming in the Large versus Programming in the Small, and bring that forward into the 21st century when we're looking at Lambda functions being our programs in the small, and YAML CloudFormation files being programming in the large, where we're putting our applications together and linking them up through CloudFormation stacks. So that, again, sounds like maybe the idea of a module interconnection language as described in this article. It could be CloudFormation templates, could be the YAML or the JSON files that we're writing in order to put this together. And is that a valid argument? I don't know. I'll let you read it. I'll point you to a link to this article, and you can read that and explore that for yourself a second time. Here's another article from that reviews some architecture. So this one's from the early 2000s, and the really interesting quote is that the lots of great ideas, forget the last solution, we promise the next one will work. And that feels a little bit like modern software development. It's like, well, we did one thing and now we forget that it didn't quite work the way we wanted it to. Let's try this next one, and we promise you this one will work better. And that's maybe a cycle that we fall ourselves into, and we should maybe think about trying to avoid if we can. So here's me. My name's Ryan. I'm a trainer at Instill. Man in a shed part-time, although full-time nowadays with the lockdown, and perpetual newbie. So I don't really know that I know everything. I'm really happy if you know something that I don't know, and please tell me when I'm wrong. And if you were to go to my Twitter profile now, hopefully you would see a link to the slides so you can get the resources that I'm linking to and some of the chat that I'm talking about. So let's engage the conversation on Twitter, and you can put me right. And I work for Instill, so we're a software development consultancy, and we also do training, and there's a lot of people in the tech community in Belfast who have experienced some training from Instill, so hopefully we're familiar to you in some way. So let's come forward again a bit more. So we're back. We're here now in the kind of the late 2010s, and DevOps is a new thing. And the first DevOps Day in 2009 introduced the idea of what DevOps was as Agile Systems Administration. So that was the idea, was let's bring the techniques from Agile, the iterations, the retrospectives, the small incremental changes, and bring that to a systems administration perspective, so we can develop infrastructure in a way that's scalable and reliable, and not a waste of money, or taking too much time, not a blocker for development. So that was really bringing the infrastructure teams and the operations teams closer to the development teams. And it maybe hasn't quite worked out some of that way. I certainly, in my perspective, as a developer in the past, the concept of DevOps has been management assuming that the developers will do operations, and that's fine, but we need to understand that operations is different, and has some difficult stuff that actually needs some special skills, and I've done a little bit of it in the past, but I'm certainly not the best at it, and I think there's value in valuing our operations colleagues. So really, let's get to the meat of it. Let's talk about the application. So here's a really simple cloud application that I built over the winter for a number of reasons, but really one was to to train myself in how these things hold together. I needed an application that was small enough that I could understand it, but sufficiently complex that it would need me to learn some new stuff. And also, it's actually for my wife, who's an author, and she wanted a subscription service for some of the writing that she's doing, and so I wanted something that would make me money, or make my wife money, and this is that application. So it's fairly straightforward. People subscribe via a React website that is served from CloudFront, and has a Cognito authentication service and a link to Stripe to handle the payments. And there's 2 Lambda functions in the back end that handle integration with Stripe and with the React application to give access to the CloudFront protected writing material, which is provided by private cookies or with the signed URLs. And all of the information is stored in DynamoDB at the bottom. So there's not a lot of moving parts, but there are enough to make it sufficiently complicated. But my experience was hindered by, an elephant in the butter dish, if you like. And, my wonderfully smooth application was destroyed by this creature that got in the way, and that animal's name was CloudFormation. And it was an unpleasant experience to kind of get myself up to speed with this thing. I knew what I wanted to build. This is not terribly complicated. I was able to draw this quite quickly. Now I understand this isn't an architecture diagram, and I was training people in architecture last week and telling them how to draw their architecture diagrams using C4 model and UML and the 4+1 model, and this is none of those things, so I need to go back and do my training again. But so that this is not a complex application. It's got a number of moving parts that tie together, but I struggled to get it to deploy it in the shape that I wanted, even though I knew what I wanted it to look like. And that's because of CloudFormation. So here's a kind of a slide with a snippet of my Git history. So 2/3 of my Git commits on this project over the course of a month or two in my evenings and weekends were changes to the CloudFormation template. So I knew what I wanted to do. I wrote the CloudFormation template to do what I wanted it. I committed that template and got CloudFormation to build the stack, and it fell over. And that happened any number of times, and you can see here with the list of Git commits that there's a lot of like small changes and pings and all that sort of, just to kind of poke it and nudge it and try and make it work the way I wanted it to. And it took me a long time with a lot of kind of, I want to do this, and then I had to roll it back and do something different. So so the CloudFormation is the problem. The reason is that it's not easy. It's a very simple set of syntax, and the YAML syntax is very simple, but it's really not easy. And what is the problem? Well, is it the documentation? Maybe the documentation on the Amazon website, AWS website, is easy. It's clear. It documents all of the fields that you need to put into your YAML document to kind of define the resource that you're interested in. But there's an awful lot of stuff behind the scenes that you need to keep in your mind. So here's the API gateway documentation, and you can read the REST API spec and write the syntax for a REST API quite easily. But what you need to know is, how does it interact with a stage, with a deployment, with a resource, and all of that sort of features? How do you integrate a custom URL into it? What happens if I want to put a CloudFormation stack in, a CloudFront stack in, sorry. How do we do that? There's so many moving parts that you need to understand, and they're not all on the one page, so you end up with 300 tabs open in your browser trying to understand how one relates to the other. So the documentation, I think, doesn't help us as much as it could. And then I asked myself, well, is it me? So maybe I'm doing it wrong, and that's likely. I mean, I'm just learning how to do it, but there's still a certain amount of time that I need to spend and read and understand and learn how to do this thing and poke at it and explore and stretch my knowledge. So there's definitely an element in this feeling, if you like, where 2/3 was infrastructure that I need to do better, and I need to improve my skills, and I'm looking for opportunities to do that. And then recently I found this tweet that came back up to my history. So it's posted in 2018, but the cycle is really clear there. You might not be able to read it on screen, but again, it's in the slides that I'm sharing. That we start with some code, and we decide that we want to add a configuration file to it. So we add the config file, and we've got a nice simple config file format. And over time, that config file format develops complexity. So we add loops, we add macros, etc., etc. And then it gets to the point when that config file is unwieldy and difficult to understand, and we go, well, I need some protection. Let's move this into code so that I've got my type safety. I can write my unit tests, and I can treat it like proper code. And that just starts that cycle all over again. And I would say that right now we're in that bottom right-hand corner where CloudFormation is templates in YAML are a little bit too complex, and we're thinking about moving them into code. In fact, a lot of us are, when we're using tools like CDK or Troposphere from Python, where we can write the specifications for our infrastructure as actual code and take advantage of the type safety that we get from that. But the sense is that actually over time that will just move again, and we'll just build another layer of config on top of that stuff. And that's a risk that we need to be aware of. So what's the answer? What do I think we need to do? Well, CloudFormation is not going away. We're going to be continuing to use it, and I think we need to get to know it. So, going down to the bottom of the two there, the learning aspect, we really need to get our heads around infrastructure, where the code that we're writing is becoming smaller in terms of the scope of the application. So we're tying functions together, we're linking to database services that we don't control. So our role as software developers is going to be more in that higher level putting together of various elements and infrastructure and functions, rather than writing whole full-blown applications. So we need to do the hard work and learn about infrastructure. And potentially go through some training, or improve the documentation through writing blog posts and writing articles, and kind of sharing the knowledge and how that works. But there's definitely, for me at least, a tooling element to this. So the CDK is an amazing solution that I discovered, sadly too late for my little application, because I'd started it before Christmas, and I only discovered the CDK in kind of January, February time, which was really annoying, because it probably would have saved me a lot of my type errors and kind of things where I'd missed elements in my spec. But what it doesn't give you is total confidence that you can hold it all together. You can still misconfigure a CloudFormation stack even when you're writing with a CDK. So what's the next solution? Well, I think better IDE for infrastructure. I would love it if there was like an IntelliJ type tool that allowed me to do autocomplete and IntelliSense with a YAML file. So if I could start and write a YAML file, and the tool would tell me what I've missed. The tool would let me see the interactions, the relationships between my CloudFormation elements and resources. That would be brilliant. So rather than just writing a plain YAML file that might give me warnings when I've done a formatting error, but don't really give me warnings when I've done a syntax error with the CloudFormation template. So I love that. And if somebody has that, please share it with me so that I can start writing this stuff better. And then the next big thing, probably the most significant thing I think for me, was that every time I made a change, I had to deploy the stack. I had to push the stack, the git commit up to my repository, and I needed to do a build, and I needed to kick off that stack build in order to see the problem. So if there was some way of me being able to test locally without having to go through that cycle. So when we write code, we can run our tests, and then we can commit. When I'm writing YAML, CloudFormation templates, I need to commit before I can see my tests, and that's not the best solution. So I'd love it if someone could provide me with an answer to that one, because that would make life so much easier for me. So that's my 10 minutes up. I've actually talked too much. So this is me. If you've got any questions or answers, please email me. A little call out just to the serverless bash that's taking place on Friday at lunchtime. It's on YouTube. Feel free to join in and see that. There's more stuff about serverless there. Thank you.